Love it or hate it, the AK-47 has undeniably had an impact on our history, and as a result has spawned a lot of copycats. One of those copycats is the Czechoslovakian VZ-58. This rifle was designed in 1958 in an effort to move from their older VZ-52 rifles to the new ammunition standard, the 7.62 by 39mm round. And I know what you might be thinking. If it walks like an AK and talks like an AK, why not just use an AK-47? Well, these countries like to manufacture and design things in-house because it gives them more control over the process, and in times of conflict, they don't have to rely on another country for something as crucial as a rifle. In order to highlight some of the unique features of this rifle, I think we should look at it next to the AK-47. This is an AKM, but for the purpose of this video, it's just an AK-47. So the first thing you notice is that the VZ-58 is a little bit smaller and has a significantly different finish. The AKM on the bottom has a blued finish, which produces this black color. The bluing is a process of oxidation, which creates a sort of film on the outside. Oxidation essentially kind of like rusting, almost like a form of passivation on the outside. So it just prevents this from getting destroyed by the elements. On the VZ-58, it is Parkerized instead of blued, so it has a more gray finish similar to an M1 Garand. Next up, you can see that the furniture on the AK is different. The furniture essentially being the touch points, all these non-metal points, so like the foregrip, the grip, and the stock. The foregrip and the grip on this are made out of wood, and occasionally the grip is, but the grip on this one is actually made out of Bakelite, which is what is used on all the furniture on the VZ-58. So Bakelite is an interesting material. It was invented in the early 1900s by a man named Leo Baekeland. So I should technically calling it Bakelite, but I end up shortening it just in the interest of talking quicker. But in the interest of being correct, we'll call it Bakelite for this video. And Bakelite is interesting. It is the world's first plastic. It was invented by impregnating wood with a synthetic resin and ultimately got them to where it is now, or where it was in the early 1900s. And that is sort of lending itself to the non-homogeneous look that we have here. So if you imagine our modern day plastics are very smooth, whereas this one used either wood or asbestos as a filler. So you can see it looks kind of like wood chunks, almost like particle board in there. And that is used, it's kind of the same idea behind carbon fiber. So carbon fiber is normally used in these, well, you take these sheets of carbon fiber, which are flexible, you put them in a mold, and then you impregnate that with a resin. After you cure it, it becomes very stiff. So that is a similar idea behind the original wood impregnation with synthetic resins. So that's a very long-winded explanation of what Bakelite is, but the main advantage of this is its resistance to moisture. So that is one of the key reasons why you would see an AK with a non-wood grip there, because if you imagine gripping that all day long with your hand, some of the moisture and sweat from your palm, some of the oils as well, can get absorbed into that wood and cause it to reduce in durability. So next up, we can talk about some of the way that this functions. So on the AK-47, you see it has this ejection port, which is very classic looking. On the VZ, this entire bolt is exposed, and that is a result of its history because this stemmed out of a more SKS design. One of the advantages of this is that you can use stripper clips with it. To explain what that is, I first need to shoot out a magazine so that we have an empty one. So this is just a 10-round magazine. I've honestly never seen a 10-round or a 20-rounder for the VZ-58, but I don't doubt that they exist somewhere. So now that you see this locked back, which is another interesting feature we will talk about later, it provides access into the weapon and most importantly into the magazine. So at this point, we'd be able to load stripper clips in there, and since I don't have any stripper clips of 7.62 by 39 to show you, I have an SVT-40, which operates on a similar principle, although I guess an SKS would be better if we had one. So the idea behind this one being is that it allows you to carry less of these removable box magazines, which are much more complicated to manufacture than something like a steel stripper clip like this. So in battle, you would fire out your magazine, or you would prepare it by opening the bolt. It would lock back on its own, and then you would take the stripper clip, put it into these little clips there just to help stabilize it, and then push that into the removable box magazine. This one takes 10 total rounds. On this, you would normally have a 30-round magazine, which would require three 10-round stripper clips, but just we don't have anything like that for demonstration. So afterwards, you had put all those rounds in there. It's essentially like reloading the magazine in the field because you can then remove it. You would be able to pull the bolt back. it would free itself from that bolt catch and it would be ready to go. So on this one, you can do a similar thing with those long 30-round stripper clip or 10-round stripper clips, but if you thought that trying to get a stripper clip of 7.62 by 54 rimmed into a Mosin was hard, man, just try one of these 10-round 7.62 by 39 stripper clips. They are unbelievable to try and load. But it would allow you to carry more ammunition because these magazines were significantly harder to manufacture, and you wouldn't have to carry the extra weight of just an empty magazine. So moving on, why don't we just fire off a magazine of this? You can probably see some of the rounds hitting the plate carrier, the target carrier, and then falling down onto me. That ejection is a result of the way it's designed. It is allowed to pop straight up, but I have found that generally the bolt head has that ejector spring angled to the side, so they still eject to the right, but in this game I suppose they just decided to make it go straight up. So now we have fired all 30 rounds. You can see that it is holding back, unlike the AK-47, which will just let the bolt forward on that final round. This is achieved by an additional mechanism in the magazine. This little tab there on the back, you can see that it is black here. That is attached to the follower, so that when you add bullets in there, that follower will go down, which is pushed up by the spring, and this tab will disappear. When this tab is present, so when there are no more rounds left, that tab will press up against, I need something to point with, that tab will press up against this piece of metal there, which will then interfere with the bolt. So on that final round, it will be pressing up against that, and when you shoot it, this bolt will come back and then not be able to move forward because that tab on the bottom of the empty magazine is holding it backwards. So that is a neat feature of this that the AK does not have, just an additional little refinement. Another advantage of this is that if you do need to perform some kind of clearing, maintenance, there's a malfunction, you can hold the bolt back easily by using your pointer finger, your index finger, your shooting finger, to press up on that button there, which will push that same mechanism up, and you can use your index finger to hold this back, push it up with your right index finger, and it will help keep the bolt locked back. That's actually an advantage that it has over a lot of firearms, something like an AR-15, where you need to do a quote-unquote three-handed maneuver. You need to hold the gun, you need to pull the bolt back on an AR-15, and then you need to use kind of a third hand or just an interesting grip to hold that bolt catch, which is this there. So this one's a little easier to do, but there still are a myriad of other advantages an AR-15 may have. One more difference between these two, I guess that's empty, we don't need that, is the way that this magazine release works. So on this one, it's a little bit more refined, and it's also recessed. It is blocked by this trigger guard, so you can't use your finger to swivel that out. There is this one, this custom tactical one, you can see has a nice extension there, which allows you to be either left or right-handed and use that pointer finger to push that down, and you can drop the magazine with just one hand. The standard version does not have that. This wasn't really widely used. This is a more modern interpretation that people nowadays might create. But on this one, it is sort of ambidextrous. You can't use your shooting finger. Instead, you have to grab it with your offhand, grab it with your thumb to swivel it out. So on this one, because it is still showing on the bottom, you can perform a tactical reload. Need an extra magazine here. So if I am in the field, I want to shoot out this magazine. You can then grab a new magazine, and then with that hand, you can use that magazine to eject the old one, put the new one in, and then use that hand to charge it again. Now notice that you do have to charge it from its ready position. That is because this doesn't hold back. And I know you may have seen me use the heel of the magazine. Generally you use the front, but there is a clipping problem in the game wherein these will not contact each other. So I have to use the bottom, which actually, oh no, dominoes, which actually helps to get that magazine out. Stack these back up, nice and neat. Okay, moving on. One last thing that I want to talk about between these two rifles, because aside from that, they're pretty similar. I mean, the sights are pretty similar. The grip and the way that they are held is pretty similar. The overall shape is pretty similar, but they don't actually share any parts, at least none that I'm aware of. And one of the reasons is because of the way that these two function. So the AK-47 has a long stroke gas gas piston system. So this bolt here is attached to a very long piston, which goes all the way up to there. You can see it in there on top. And now you can see it turn silver there. So that extends all the way up to here, so that when a bullet is fired through the barrel, the expanding gases behind it will go up into this chamber through the gas block and push this entire piston back, which forces the bolt back because it is attached to that piston. Now, as a result, some of the gases can escape past the head of that piston and into this area here, which can dirty up the rifle a bit. But since this is so open, that's not a huge problem as long as you're cleaning it regularly. Whereas on the VZ58, it has a short stroke gas piston system. So this little silver dot you see there is the end of the gas rod. The gas rod goes from here all the way to the front of the gas block and will actually not contact, or it doesn't connect to the bolt as it does in the AK. So similarly, when the bolt is fired, the gases expand behind it, gets forced up into the gas block and pushes this little gas rod backwards, this gas piston, but only about 3/4 of an inch. It only will shoot it back about that far, but it does so quickly that it imparts a lot of momentum onto the bolt, and this will continue flying back through inertia. Once it hits the back, the recoil spring pushes it forward again, and the entire system is cycled. So this has the advantage of not shooting a lot of carbon residue into the gun, which could potentially gunk it up and make it not fire. So enough talking, let's just shoot it a little bit more, this time accurately. You can see some of those bullets falling down and resting on the stock. It was kind of amusing. So, empty magazine. And yeah, man, if you just look at these there, compared to an AK magazine, still more complicated, especially compared to stripper clips. I don't need to hammer on that anymore. So let's move on. I guess we don't need you anymore. We're done with you. To some of the other variants. This variant with a folding stock was reserved for paratroopers or airborne troops because it would allow you to swivel this off to the side and hold it on your chest as you're trying to drop off of an airplane, just to keep everything, out of your way, similar to something like an M1 carbine would work. But functionally, it is very similar. It is identical, just has a different stock. One thing that I've noticed when shooting something like this versus a full stocked VZ is that the weight of this rear stock is significant enough that it changes the balance point, especially compared to this almost skeletonized steel stock. So that on this, I'd say with a full magazine, the center of gravity is somewhere around here, which puts it a little bit more on your front hand. Whereas with a full magazine, something with a full stock would move the center of gravity back a little bit further, so it's more even across your front and your rear hand. I find that to be nicer on something like this, but not so much like a bullpup design with all that weight back there is really uncomfortable to fire. So you want that weight far enough that it's even on your hands, you can swivel easily, but not too far forward that your front arm is just going to get tired very, very quickly. So that's something I've noticed, that I prefer these ones which do not fold, but I don't have to carry these around or jump from airplanes, so I'm sure that a folding stock like this would be very helpful. Let's see if I can hit that just at the hip, firing from the hip. No, not too good. I only got 1 in the bullseye and 4 more on the paper, so I've got some magazines here. Let's try that one more time. I didn't have tracers or anything, so I just had to kind of feel where it was going. That one still wasn't as good, only 1 in the bullseye. So this just goes to show you, aim before you shoot. So finally, I have this custom version, this VZ58 modern interpretation, which has some notable differences. Has these synthetic polymer, like modern day plastics on it. Has some rails on the dust cover, this front foregrip bottom, and a different muzzle device. And just an interesting note about this muzzle device is that In places like the United States, which have regulations on the length of firearms for what civilians can buy, you can get a semi-automatic version of this, but it has this muzzle device pinned on, so it cannot be removed without cutting or breaking this. And the reason that that happens is, or that is done, is to increase the overall length. So by not removing that, by not allowing the user to remove this, it essentially makes it long enough that it can be purchased by civilians. The idea behind that is that it makes it hard to conceal, so you can't fit it into your pants or anything, but that little difference, I guess, is enough to make it legal. So I think I'm almost out, so I'm going to spawn lock that and create a bunch of extra magazines. Let's fire this off. Very cool. Something I forgot to mention earlier as a difference between these two is the cyclic rate, or the rate of fire. So if I grab these are my extra mags back there. If I grab a magazine of 7.62x39 for the AK, and a magazine of 7.62x39 for the VZ, it is important to note that these magazines are not interchangeable. We can now fire them side by side, and you can see the difference in rate of fire. So, certainly not accurate. Did hit the target a few times, but not on purpose, really. But one thing to notice, you probably heard this AK fire for a little bit longer because this VZ finished earlier, and that's because this has a rate of fire of 800 rounds per minute, whereas the AK has a rate of fire of 600 rounds per minute. And that's not necessarily an advantage for the VZ because it does make it significantly harder to control that higher rate of fire. So you have to decide whether or not that's worth the extra bullets that you can throw down in a hurry. I think it's not really a huge advantage because ammo conservation is important, but another thing, like I said, I've never been in combat, so I can't speak to these things. So since we have some attachments, we're going to throw those on. Let's try and put a laser down here. Cool little red laser. See if I can throw that stock. No, it doesn't look like I can get these both on. Oh, no, there we go. Not too bad. Why don't we move this on to the top, actually, since we can. Oh, it looks like it just goes straight into the front sight post. That's not going to be super helpful. I think it's not going past that front sight post anyways, so I'm going to try and move it back to the bottom. Nope, no dice. All right, we're going to toss that. And we can put on a scope. And one thing I want to mention about this is that when you put it on the dust cover like this, it is really not that well calibrated to where this gun is going to shoot, because this dust cover, while it is attached very well to this receiver, and I imagine that helps with these extra screws on the bottom there, it is still not directly attached to the barrel. So if there's some flex in the receiver, which I guess would be unlikely since this is very nicely milled, even if there's some flex in the receiver, it won't necessarily be pointed in the same direction as the barrel. So in very high accuracy situations, you want this attached to the barrel very close to the receiver, or occasionally next to it, free floating it. And that is because if the barrel flexes at all, you have this still tied to wherever the barrel is pointed. So for these, we can either put it up front, which would be even less accurate because this is pinned down with just a push pin there and a latch swivel mechanism there. You see a lot of this happen on AKs where people will replace this front part with something that has a Picatinny rail on it. So let's move this just back for better viewing purposes. And finally, we do have a suppressor. Looks like we're clear. Thread that on and do some more shooting. So in the game, you'll see me just put it in like that, but in reality, you're supposed to let that front part clip in or rest on the lip and then swivel it backwards like that. So it will swivel in, it will catch the back there and be all ready to go. Okay, how'd I do there? 30 rounds on target, 228 points. That's pretty good. I'm going to clear it and then do one of these full auto. See if I can beat 228. I feel pretty good about that. That looks pretty good. 239. All right, beat it by 11 points. And one more since we're here. Although I think this 20 is filled out too. Can I beat 239? 266! A lot better. Whew. Okay. Pretty cool. Pretty good stuff. This custom VZ58. How's that look with a 20 rounder in it? Pretty cool. I've always thought that lower capacity magazines make guns look more accurate, because it moves a little bit less from assault rifle territory into something like a DMR territory. So there you have it. The VZ58. I guess I should show you the classic version. VZ58, a pretty cool rifle, still used a little bit today, and I would say kind of sought after by collectors. If you have the opportunity to get one, get them, because they're pretty cool. Anyways, that is all I have to tell you, and I know this was really heavy on the facts, but if you made it this far, you are an absolute champion. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.